All right. Good evening, friends, and thank you for registering for this webinar. This is a partnership between TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, and the Diocese of Milwaukee. And we are here together to talk about making the case, designing for impact, how to take a look at your stewardship materials, and tell the story of your congregation. I love doing this work for TENS, and I'm privileged to be able to beam myself all over the country to do these things. I'm joining you from my living room in San Francisco, California. I live on a busy street, and so if you hear noises outside, I'm all right. The sirens aren't coming for me, I hope. And so don't mind that, but I live across the street from a fire station. Good neighbors. All right, folks, let's get started. Tonight's learning objectives, we're going to be talking about what is a case for support, why have materials that tell our story, and why is if it's a brochure or a flyer, why do we need to even make the case or convince people about making their gift to our stewardship campaigns? We're going to talk a little bit about some differences between generations as we engage our donors. We're going to talk a lot about what elements should go into making your case. So how to build the story of your congregation and tell your impact in the community. Finally, we're going to talk a little bit about how, after you've done all that, after you've collected everything, how do you put it together in a way that people can digest it and understand it and appreciate it? That's part of the art of creating good materials, is making sure that they make sense to everyone else. A case for support, it tells your story. It tells the story of your congregation, your history, your impact in your neighborhood, who you are, who you represent, who you have been, and it shares those emotional stories to connect your members to your vision and your mission. We always want to make certain that as much as church is about feeling good and coming together and loving each other, taking care of each other, all the things that we love to do in church, it's also about serving our neighbor and strengthening our communities and doing that work too. So making sure that we're always connected to mission and message is really important. And our materials should help do that. And it's also to build commitment to our goals. So we want people to understand why we're raising money, what that money is going for, what we're going to do with it. Part of this is showing off that we have good stewardship and letting people know that their money is being well taken care of and well spent on the things that we said we would do. A good case statement or a good brochure or element for your campaign starts with your goals and your plan. If you are a church that is operating from a strategic plan, maybe recently you went on a retreat and you created 5 years of plan or something like that. Maybe you're somewhere in the middle of that. Maybe you haven't done this work in a while. And so you should start by saying, well, what are the goals of our ministry? What are we trying to accomplish? Who are we in the world? However you do that, in vestry, in small group, at retreats, all the different ways that Episcopal churches gather to do that work, you should start off with a few goals, some plans, where you want to go. A couple of questions that you'll want to answer in this is, what is the impact of our ministry in our community, internal and external? I always like to make sure that whenever we're talking about ministry or mission, that we're focused on what we do outside and we're focused on what we do inside. In-reach and outreach are equally important to us in our churches, and we should give ourselves credit for doing a good job at both of those. So knowing what your impact is really important. I'll talk about this a lot tonight. One of the things that I like to say is that it's wonderful to have a food program, for example. It's even better to say, how many people do we feed in a month or in a year or in a week? Letting people know how much their gift matters, how much this ministry means to the community. So gather those metrics, learn about them. And you should have some kind of description of that impact, or even better, where you want to go. Right now, we're feeding 100 people a week. We'd like to be able to feed 200 people a week. We're trying to build this program. It helps people understand why you're asking them to give money to your campaign, why you're asking them to participate in stewardship. Every gift has impact. And I like to say in church, every dollar goes to mission. We don't always think about that because sometimes we think about the dollars that we spend on our aging church buildings or on our insurance or our alarm system, the things that don't feel very much like ministry. And we also spend it on program and supplies and the choir and all the things that do feel like ministry. We should know that every single dollar we spend, however it gets spent, is focused on making our space, our people, our resources available to our members and to the community. So every gift has impact. Every dollar goes to mission. This should motivate people. This should motivate people because they understand that their gift matters, that without their gift, there would be a hole in the budget. There would be a problem. We need everyone to participate. Every gift matters and every gift is needed. One of my mentors in stewardship is the recently retired Bishop of Olympia, Greg Rickel. And a couple of years ago, I was on a call with him and he said, we were talking about the tithe, you know, how Episcopalians sometimes like to remind us that the tithe, giving 10%, is something we should strive for in our stewardship plans, in our personal household budgets. And he said, I want you to forget about this tithe, 10%. We as Christians, we are 100% all into the mission. We believe what we do, we care about it, we are in our hours that we spend volunteering, and the ideas that we share and give, and the ways we help our congregations grow, and in the gifts that we put in the plate. We are all in 100%. Forget about the tithe. We are 100% Christians. And I like to remind us that our case, our members, our community, our neighbors, they help us to be generous when we think about what our impact has on those gifts. Your materials and your language as you talk about your campaigns should have that kind of real lift to them. Let people know what they're doing for the community. Finally, part of impact is that every person has a reason for participating in the giving. Often at stewardship time, I don't know if you do this in your congregation, but in mine, we do a minute for mission where somebody will stand up and say, I've been a member for 20 years and my family started coming here and this is why we stayed and this is the program that most matters to us and this is what we love about our church. And they give that as sort of a reason for why we're here, how we stayed. It's important. I always love to ask Episcopalians, how did you find this church? And they all have an answer. Everybody has an answer to why this church felt like home. And then the more interesting follow-up question is, what kept you coming back? Why are you still here? Why did you come back the next Sunday and a month later and 40 years later? Why are you still a member here? And those stories are the really beautiful ones because that's when we connect to our heart and we connect with the impact of our gift and the impact of our ministry and the impact of our church in the world. Everybody then becomes a part of our campaign, and we should inspire people to develop their own talking points. We're going to talk a little bit about this later in our session. Talking points, your personal reason for why you write a check or put money in the plate or volunteer your Saturday afternoons or volunteer to serve on those committees that last forever. Why do you do that? What are your talking points? And how can you help other people write or understand their own talking points? One of the things that's really important in creating a statement is that you pull all of this information together. We're going to talk about how we pull it together later, but I want to emphasize this now and throughout. That it's important to test what you write, your materials out on a small group of folks before it's ready for everyone else. And I realize that this adds, I put it at the beginning of the presentation because it adds some time to our timeline. Often when we think about writing our brochure or creating our stewardship materials, it's starting next week and we got to get something out into the printer and we need it in everybody's hands next Sunday. And if that's the case, you just got to go with it. But if you have that time to add an extra few days or a week into your timeline or more, so that you can test your message out on some folks, you'll get great feedback. When I do this in my own church, or when I see other folks do it in their churches, and they pull together 6 people maybe from the congregation, someone who's new and someone who's been here forever and someone who has kids and someone who sings in the choir, pull a representative sample from the different sort of folks who show up at your church and say, tell me how this strikes you. We've written all this, we've put it together, we're trying to do our campaign. What's missing? What would you add? What insider language did we use that might need to be explained further? Did anything miss? Are you wondering why we're talking about something? Because it doesn't seem to fit. The kinds of feedback you'll get if you take the time to test your case is really important. So please do it. Please add some time into your timeline. Refine it and change it, and you'll have some materials that are even better than the ones you first thought you created. And they were perfect when you hit send, but they will be even better when somebody else takes a look at it. I like to remind ourselves when we talk about materials that we might need to nuance our brochure. If this is your trifold church brochure that's sitting on your rack, or if it's your stewardship letter, or whatever it is that we're talking about here, your case statement, there might need to be certain things that you put with it depending on who you're giving it to and for what reason. I say this to say you might have a church brochure and you hand it out to newcomers. Well, what else do newcomers need? Do they need a little welcome packet with who does what in our church, or why we even, how our budgets are created? If they're coming from another faith tradition or another denomination, they might not understand how we do our budget and how we raise our money. What else do you need to explain to them that doesn't fit into the space of a brochure that you might have created? Or how are different generations motivated by different factors in your church? Not everybody gives to church just because it's church. And the younger our donors get, this is a very general statement, but the younger our members and donors are, the more proof they need of what we're doing and why we're asking for their support. So that is to say, someone who might be from the greatest generation or from our late baby boomers, they might not need you to explain to them why you should give money to church, because they've been raised with the sense, this is a general statement, they've been raised with the sense that church is church and you should support it and it matters. Whereas younger members might be a little bit more skeptical. They might need to say, well, what are you spending my money on? What are you doing with this? What's the impact? You might need to provide more information for some of your younger donors. So know that and be able to explain it. Don't just hand them a piece of paper and that's it. You might have to have some nuanced conversations depending on where people are at in their life cycle, in their job cycle, in their connection to the church. A lot of congregations apply for some outside funding, maybe small community foundations that provide grants, or maybe a lot of big box retailers, Target or Sam's Club or something like that, will do community grants. They have money set aside, and that's not a lot, $500, $1,500 dollars that they give to schools and churches and local girls and boys programs, things like that. If you're applying to that, they might need different information yet again, like who goes to this church? If I'm going to give you some community money, are my shoppers going to your church? Are the people who come into my store going to your church? Will I be noticed for doing this? So different organizations have different reasons for wanting to support you. If your church is one of those that applies for those kinds of grants from your local grocery store, or your bank sometimes has those small community grants, consider what additional information they might want, so that you can add that, especially into the story that you're using to tell that story to them. These are really great things to do. It's not a lot of money that often comes from those efforts, but they can fund supplies for a small program, or a particular Saturday program or something like that that you might have. Don't overlook them just because they're small amounts of money. They're also great for if you have a confirmation class, to to ask them to write that letter to the big box retailer and ask them for the money. It gets them in the mindset that church is a fundraising venture as well, and that this is something that it's a skill they can learn early, or a responsibility that they can learn early. All right, so let's talk about this case statement. Your case should tell your story. And we're going to drill down on each of these 5 points as we move through this presentation. We should talk about your history, why you are located where you are. How long have you been there? What have you been doing? Why did you get founded? It should talk about if there was a particular reason. We have a congregation here in the Diocese of California that was founded because it was close to the port. And so it supported sailors and people who might, be from another country or from across the nation, and they were only there while their boats were being loaded and unloaded. And this church was founded to sort of support that kind of a ministry. And we don't do shipping in the same way as we did in the 19th century. And so that church has had to move on. Those stories, why was this church founded? What was it doing there? Why in this neighborhood? What impact did it have? Was it tied to a specific ministry or mission? Or was it a church plant that was there to grow the whole neighborhood and be a part of it? Find out those stories. They're so exciting and they're really interesting to tell. What services do you offer? So we should know, do you have a tutoring program, an adult daycare program, a preschool? What are the things that you do that are ministry? What are your internal ministries, your altar guild, your flower committee, your formation group, your book studies, your Bible studies, your senior group, your kids groups? Talk about those. These are the services that we offer the community. These are the services that we offer to our members. Always talk about how your members can become engaged. That is both with their gifts of time, but also of talent and of treasure. So how can your do you ask for volunteers? Do you ask for committee participation? How can your members get involved when they want to roll up their sleeves? And finally, how do you bring about the kingdom of God? I think that's the essential question that everybody wants to know. How does your church bring about God's reign on earth. What are you doing out there to talk about the story of Jesus, how we come to know God, and how that is going to change the world? And believe it or not, churches do change the world. A few years ago, this is pre-pandemic now, an organization called Partners for Sacred Spaces put together a study called The Economic Halo Effect of Church. And they surveyed mosques, temples, synagogues, and churches from across the country. And they just asked them, what services do you provide? And how many members and how many people come in and out of your building in a week that may not be members, but are part of the community for other reasons? They compiled all of that. And what they realized is that an average of $1.3 million a year of service gets provided to a community because a church is there. This is an average number, which takes into account mega churches and takes into account tiny congregations. But that across the country, every temple, synagogue, church, and mosque contributes value to its community by being there. It can be the light that stays on 24 hours a day and keeps the neighborhood safe. It can be the community groups that come and go, the 12-step groups, or we have music programs or other nonprofits that use your space. And of course, the kinds of engagement that your volunteers go out and do. The most important value that churches give is that its members, fed and nourished by the Eucharist and by the gospel and by the love that they've shared in church, go out into the world and do other great things. They participate in civic society. They raise strong families. They work hard in their jobs. They give value to the world. And this is something, I know it's a bit grandiose, but let's not shrink back from the fact that we in church are a character factory. We build people up so they can go out and do the great things that Jesus sent us to do. And this is what it's all about. This Sunday in church, we're going to get on Trinity, we're going to get Matthew in his very last, the last part of his gospel. And Jesus is telling his disciples to go out and love. I've commanded you to love. Go and do it in my name, in the name of the Trinity, and make disciples of all nations. We hear that this week, and this is the charge. Get out there and do this work in all the ways that you can do it. Our ministry, our members, our materials should talk about that, how we go out and do that work. So let's talk a little bit about the elements that specifically need to go into your case. We're going to start with how your church is founded. I love going through old church registers. I love going through documents. I'm that kind of a person. But I also love finding people who have been in a church for a long time and asking them to tell me some stories about people who used to be there. And go back as far as you can. So what do you know? Does the diocese have any information about your church? Find the archives, learn about your church. Who is your patron saint? And or for what attribute or festival of the church was your church named? And why did that happen? Was it just the day that the church was founded, or was there a particular charism or reason why that person or event was named as your church? Was there a particular group of people who founded your church? I love visiting churches all over the country. And often, if you find a church that is about as old as the community, has been there for a long time, you look at the names on the stained glass windows of Episcopal churches, donated by this family, given in honor of this or that person or whomever, you'll see that name show up around town, maybe in the names of the streets or in the names of buildings, because those people who founded the church were also influential in the community as well. And church and city come up together in a lot of places. Maybe that's just very California, where we're a newer place. But I love seeing that relationship between the people who started a church and the community that they're in. We have the person one of the people who founded my church, a playground, a few blocks away is also named for them. And that's really interesting. I have no idea why that happened. And we've been trying to find that story out. Why did that happen? How did those two things connect up to each other? Why are you in a particular neighborhood or community? Some of our churches were founded because the neighbors were growing, and in the 50s or in the 1820s, the diocese decided that this church needed to be here to, the city was expanding or a community was developing around it. Maybe there are other reasons that your church is placed where it is. Learn about that, or what clues can you tell from around you? It's interesting to know if we came from another church. Maybe you were a mission of another congregation that was really big and started your church, and now you're flourishing on your own. Tell these stories. And also, finally, who's been a member? Are they of historical note, local or national? Did they start a business that was important to the town? Did they write a hit song? Who are the people who have been in your church and have participated over history? Did they belong to city government? Did they go on to have some other kind of career? Find those little stories, those little nuggets of information, and tell them too. I realize that's a lot of information, but if you're an archive kind of person and you like that, these little lines that you pick up become color in your brochure. They become story that you can tell. They become a part of what's unique about your church. Take a good look around your community. Who are your neighbors? In my church, and I know this is true of many others, they take a walk around their neighbor. I'm in a city, so we can walk our neighborhood. Maybe in other places where spaces are bigger, you drive or you take a bike ride. Who are the people in your neighborhood? And what are they doing? Are they pushing strollers? Are they holding canes? Are they commuting to work and you don't see them for most of the day? Who are the people that live in your neighborhood? And then what do they need from you? And how do those needs change over time? I think this is really interesting because we put a lot of investment into a building, into a place, and then the neighborhood changes around it. Maybe, economic circumstances change. Maybe just, the newer neighborhood was built further away, and so people moved out and the families moved with them. And now we have retirees living where we do. So how does your ministry change as the neighborhood changes? And how do you describe that? How do you talk about how we serve who's here now and prepare for who's coming? We can't serve people who are no longer here. And a lot of times our ministries harken back to old days, or we have legacy ministries that we just can't seem to shake, even if they don't have as much enthusiasm or participation as they might have had. It's beautiful. We don't want to let things go. I know that, but sometimes we need to take a look around and say, how many people are still benefiting from this? Is it time to spend our energy on something else? Not always. This is a discernment that you take as a community. Who's served by your inward ministry? Your neighbors are important, but so are your members. Let's remember that we can talk about those ministries in our case for giving as well, in our case for support. So if you have groups that meet or special ministries for your members based on age or ability or affinity. Take those into account and write about them and describe them. Help people understand the color of your congregation and what you're doing. Do you have other groups that meet in your space, like 12-step groups or uh, caregiver support or young families that come, music programs, nonprofits? Talk about those as well, because that's a part of your community. So once you know who your neighbors are, what is it that they need? Do they need, do you see a lot of people in your neighborhood that look like they are food insecure? Does that mean that maybe you should start to think about a food pantry or a can drive? Does your community have veterans in it? Are there things you could be doing for veterans? Does your community have working parents who are really in need of some great tutoring or after school programs so that their kids have a safe place to be in a place that shares their values? What sorts of things do your neighbors need? And these are great things to put on your list of aspiration. This is what we want to do. This is who our community is. These are the kinds of programs that we need to create and fund in order to be relevant in our community in the future. How do we do that? We need to show in our materials and in our lives evidence of good stewardship. Transparent and accountable leadership is absolutely essential in our churches. If people feel like decisions are being made behind closed doors, or they don't have access to knowing how the budget is put together, or how our money is spent, or what we're doing with it, it creates conflict and it creates obscurity where we need clarity. So adopt some things and then talk about it in your case. We all know here's where we keep our budget. Here's how we know what we're on track on. Is that budget online? Do you post it on your website? Is it posted on a bulletin board somewhere in your congregation? Can people see it? After the annual meeting and all those papers are recycled, where do people still find the budget when they have a question about it in April or July, or want to know what's going on? I think it's also really good when we put that information in our newsletters. Maybe it's just a snapshot. Here's our budget today. Here's what we said we were going to do. We're on track. We're not on track. Here's our stewardship goal. Here's what we said we were going to do. Are we on track or not? It's really helpful, I think, for people to know where we're at all the time in the promises that we made in our annual meeting. Know what you're raising money for. And I say this to say, well, duh, for the budget, for the mission, for all these things that we're talking about, but have some really specific points. We're trying to grow our stewardship because we want to hire a youth director. We really need thoughts and help on how we can develop a Bible study program, and that's going to need some resources and some materials. We're trying to raise awareness about that. What are your future goals? And make certain that they're clearly written so that people know what they're fundraising for. If you're doing any kind of outside of the stewardship campaign fundraising, an auction that's going to outreach, or a dinner or a bazaar, or those kinds of things that our churches do, be really clear about what that money's going for. Is it for a special ministry that you support outside your budget? Is it going toward the operating fund? Is it to send the kids on a mission trip somewhere? What are you doing with those special events as well? So have goals and be able to talk about them. Do you publish or have open vestry meetings? Do you publish the minutes? Do people know where they can find it? I don't think anybody wants to spend a Tuesday night in a vestry meeting that they don't have to attend, but the invitation that they know they can often shows we're transparent. We're not meeting in secret. And here's where you can find the minutes and what we discussed. You can always put into the minutes, you can always go into an executive session if you are talking about something sensitive that you wouldn't want notes taken on, like if it's a HR issue or if there's something, that the vestry is grappling with, you can always go into a special session. But knowing what the general meeting was about and who said what and what ideas were proposed, what problems are being solved, these are really great things for people to know about because it helps us understand that the church is responsive and that we're a part of it. Finally, if there's something big going on in your communities, and maybe it's something that you're planning for, I have a church that I work with nearby that has a lot of veterans in it. It's that kind of a church that created that program and that outreach. And right now they are looking at, well, I think we've been saved today with the debt talks that happened in Washington and the fact that we have a debt ceiling again. But last week they were preparing for what happens if some of our payments get interrupted. How is the church going to be available and step in to provide some services if there's some kind of interruption in the benefits that our veterans were achieving? And I love that they were trying to get ahead of this problem. They were trying to do some resource gathering and also talking about it, right? They talked to their members about it. We might need some help with this. We might need some special gifts. We might need some meals provided. We might need whatever. So knowing if there's a situation going on that's really local or really big, and you can plan for it and name it and talk about, here's how we're going to overcome it or work on it together. This is a really good thing for churches to do, and it shows that we are responsive and engaged. Our leaders should be forward thinking, as I just said right now, or before. We need to have these plans. We need to think about predictable future events. We need to strengthen what is good and shore up things. We need to prepare for the times that are rough. Some years are better than others, and we're able to put money aside and put money into reserves. And sometimes people have questions about this. Why is the church saving its money? Why isn't it giving it to the poor or, sharing it with our neighbors? And we do give to the poor and share with our neighbors, but we also have to think about tough times that come, and we might need to build up some reserves. And so being able to address that is very future forward. There are going to be times we might have a hard time or, go through an extended recovery period or something like that. Or maybe our members are going to need some particular help. How can we talk about our budget and our resources in that way? Are you planning on hiring someone or growing a program or improving a building? Talk about those things as well, because those help us understand, oh, this is why I'm being asked to increase my gift this year, because we're doing these great things. We have these visions in mind. Let's get there. Finally, in a case for giving in your support, please make sure that you give people options on how they can give, how they can support your church. I look at a lot of brochures and people send me what they're working on, or sometimes they send me what they printed and it's already gone out, and they've forgotten to tell people how they can make their gift, where to send the check, or where to go online to make a gift, or how the church accepts gifts. And it's not because, it's just because they forgot it. We don't think about it. We think about, everybody knows how to give to our church, but maybe not everybody does. So let's make sure that when you've put all this time and intention in thinking about your gift, that you also tell people how they can make it. It's really important, I think, these days to have an online way to give money. It's for your visitors, for your members, They should be able to make gifts when they're not at church. It's really helpful. Gone are the days when people go off for the summer or have extended vacations and the plate really drops off and the cash drops off, because now we give electronically in a lot of places, and that money keeps coming out of our bank account, whether we're in town or out of town. So make sure that you have some ways for people to make their gifts online. Um, Put your pledge cards or your intentions online and paper. Paper is great. We love paper in church. We can collect them. We can bless them. There's that manual act of filling out a pledge form. It's really a good experience. Also make that something that people can put online. Your website probably has a way to create a little field for forms where you put in, your name and your contact information and how much you'd like to give at minimum, and submit it, and it goes to the treasurer and they can read that. Make sure that you have a way for people to do that online as well as paper. There are lots of ways that churches can and should be accepting gifts from its members. Not just checks and cash in a plate, but a lot of people choose to have the bank pay their check. It comes out as often as people want it to. So bill pay, if your bank offers that, you can sign your church up as someone that you send a regular payment to, and the bank will cut a check. It's really important that people know that they can give securities. I know the market hasn't been great in the last year, but people do have some appreciated stock, some securities that they might be able to give to the church. And when they do that to the church, they can avoid some of the hit in capital gains that they would have to take. So there are some real tax-wise reasons why accepting stock is a really easy way for your church to accept gifts from some folks. If you don't have a brokerage or a way to sell stock that's given to you, your diocese does, and they can help you figure that out and tell you what to do if you get a gift of stock. Many of us are giving from our retirement assets, and that also has some tax advantages. Required minimum distributions are a way that people make gifts from their retirement, that money that they have to take out of retirement after they've gotten to 70 and a half years old. Some people use that to make their charitable giving. There are other ways that you can give directly from your retirement accounts, and your treasurer should be familiar with them. If they aren't, your diocese, CFO, or finance folks can probably help you figure out how you can accept gifts from retirement accounts. We should always include on our giving a little plug for planned gifts or estate planned gifts. We are all going to die one day, and we are all going to pass on our gifts to who is left. And we want to make sure that people know that the church is one way that they can make gifts after they've gone, and that there are lots of ways to do that. Your diocesan folks, or maybe you have a legacy society or a planned giving society that knows how to help people think about those ways that they can make gifts through annuities or trusts, have a lifetime income stream, and then something that goes to the church after they die, or other kinds of bequests or insurance or retirement giving that they can do that are a part of an estate gift. So learn about that from your diocese, or learn about it from the Episcopal Church Foundation, ecf.org. They have lots of great ways for you to share information about estate giving. All right, so we've talked about a whole lot of information that you've gathered: history, mission, ministry, your needs, who your neighbors are, who you are. And now we have to put all that together in something that is legible, has some pictures in it, has some margins, isn't in teeny tiny font, and doesn't take up a phone book. We don't have phone books anymore, I realize, but doesn't take up a huge book of information to share with people. So how do you make that into a document, a trifold or a brochure, something that has pictures and stories on it? Well, one way you do that is to make it very specific. We're asking for your gift for this year. Here are the things that we're doing. Here are the things that we're trying to raise money for. I always like to remind folks in church that a general ask yields a general result. But if you're specific about what you're asking for, we are asking you to increase your gift, or we are asking you to give to the campaign, and here's the goal. We're asking for something very specific from you right now. It helps people understand this is the ask. This is what needs to happen right now. Also, put your volunteer goals in there as well. We need people to staff our Saturday table at the fair. We need people to serve on vestry or on the communications team or on our outreach team. If you are having those kinds of things that you're raising awareness for, those should go into your materials as well. Pictures are absolutely important. We've talked a lot about stories and text. Let's remember that pictures convey whole meanings and emotions that would take, pages of text to talk about sometimes. So find those great pictures of your ministry. It is better when you find your own members, pictures of you doing your stuff in your church, in your community. But I know that sometimes that's hard to find. We are especially missing pictures after a few years of pandemic and everybody was wearing masks and you couldn't see their smiles. So it's time to rebuild your photo library. Ask some members who are really good at taking pictures to show up at your volunteer events, to show up at church and take pictures of things. If you have a phone, you also have probably a pretty good camera in your pocket. Take some pictures of things that are going on or videos and let people see what's happening. Make sure you get permissions. If you're going to put something in a brochure, you should ask people, we're going to take your picture. Is that all right? And especially if there are kids involved, you need to make sure that their parents know this is happening. We're very sensitive about it in my own church. There are some families that don't want their kids on the internet. And so if we're going to take something that's going to go on our Facebook page, for example, they'll just pull their kids off to the side and then they come back in and join the group. This is just knowing that this is how people are. Get permission from parents before you take too many pictures of kids. Minimize your copies. You've written all this great stuff. Now have someone in your congregation that maybe works in advertising or journalism or is an English teacher, someone who's really good with the red pen and can make your statement concise. I use about 50 words sometimes when 5 would do, and I need to have a really good editor often for the things that I write. If you're like I am, have someone help you who can craft action-packed sentences and take big copy and put it down into bullet points that people can understand. This is what's being asked of me. This is what we're talking about right now. Develop those metrics and use numbers when possible. It's really great to say, we serve people. It's better to say how many we serve or what the impact of that is. Numbers like pictures tell stories. So help you use them when they help you. Tell stories. We talked about earlier those minutes for mission that we share. A really compelling story from someone that you go to the communion rail with or that you sit next to at potluck, that you've known for a long time, when you hear their stories and share your own, you've said something really beautiful and communicated something powerful. So collect those testimonials. These days, we have ways to do that through videos. We have ways to do that through writing. Your newsletter, your brochure should have a couple of stories in it. You know, talk about from someone's perspective, why they're there, when their family started attending, what gives them joy about your ministry. Always remember that gratitude and generosity are related. We give because we are so grateful for all that has been given to us. We give sparked by that amazing generosity of God from creation. We are so grateful for all that we've been given. That's the root of our generosity. And the more that we participate in that, the more that we are grateful, the more generous we become. It becomes its own sort of gift. Make sure that you, when you put something in paper, you have whatever it is. You've crafted something beautiful. It's been drafted. It's got pictures. You have tested the case. It's ready to go, and you have beautiful print copies of it. Make sure that there's also a PDF or a way that you can share that electronically. Attach it to an email or post it for download on a website, so that if people don't happen to be nearby, they're not reliant on a piece of paper to get what they need. This is true of pledge cards. It's also true of your stewardship letters, of your giving brochure, of your marketing materials. Make sure that there's an e-copy of all of that that can be sent through email or can be posted to a website and people can download. My church, and many churches, have a giving page on their website, and people can go there and download all the information that they need when it's time to make their gift. Have it in one spot. It's just like having it on the back table or the pew or the rack, track rack in your church, where people can pick stuff up. So also have it where they can download it. Challenge everyone to develop their own story. We talked about this earlier in talking points. The elevator pitch, this idea that you have 11 seconds or 8 floors of an elevator to convince someone of your big idea, comes from our marketing friends or our sales friends, people who work in that field. Your elevator pitch, those talking points, are your entry into telling why you support the church. So when you're leading stewardship, when you're making your own gift, take a moment to reflect. Why am I doing this? What matters to me about this? What did I discern in my heart that was important to make me set this money aside or this time aside and give it to my church and give it to God? Why does this matter to me so much that I did that? That becomes your elevator pitch. And the more you say it, the more succinct it becomes. You don't have to give them paragraphs. You can say a couple of things that are really tightly crafted and personal, and that helps people understand what you're doing. So it is also when we write, when we speak, have that pitch. Here are a couple of other documents that I like to include in any stewardship material. And this goes back to the conversation about a budget. Line item budgets are very important. They're essential. Our treasurer, our finance team, our vestry use them to track how we said we would spend our money. But budgets are a visionary document, right? They tell a story about our values and how we choose to spend our money. And line items don't look very interesting. They're just line items, and they say something like salaries, benefits, building and maintenance. And those are big line items in a lot of our churches, sometimes the biggest. So narrative budgets are a way to take all of those ministry areas and separate them out and say, what does it cost in our clergy's time, in our building use, in the kind of utilities that we need to support that, in the program supplies that go into it. Takes everything that's in the budget and it says, here's how we spend our money on worship, on children, on outreach, on our own community, on, you know, what are the things that you do. So your narrative budget is a great way to further tell the story of your values. And TENS has a easy download way for you to take that Excel spreadsheet and turn it into a narrative budget that you can use to describe your work to congregations and to your members to help them with that. Here's another little example of that narrative budget. This is all in the document that you can download from the TENS website. It just talks about how we fund our budget, where the money's coming from, and then it talks about those areas of how we allocate our budget, our families, our formation, our children, our neighbors, our community life, our sacramental life. You might have more than this particular example church has. But what's important here is that they've reformulated the budgets, the same numbers, but they've talked about them in how they enact their ministry. This is the final little challenge for you. After you've done all that work, if you can get your case so succinct that it can fit on the front and back of a 3x5 card, then you know you have that pitch, that story that you want to tell about your church. You have it there in front of you, and you can share it easily. I like to call this a palm card because they're about the size of your hand. You can carry them and also carry a cocktail plate or whatever if you're circulating it at your stewardship dinner or you're talking about it with friends. They fit in your pocket. You can easily give them to someone. So this particular imaginary church in the town of Blue Hill, what they want you to know about them is that they serve, they educate, they gather, they provide, and they plant. And this is what this church, they're telling you their ministries, their impact in the community, and then on the back of the card or the front, whichever way you look at it, is a picture of them and how you can make your gift, all the ways that you can find giving information and make your gift to the church. This is one of the things that a simplified case statement, you should have that big one too, if it's your trifold or if it's a big 8.5 by 11 booklet or whatever you do, but have something small too, as an exercise, as a tool for telling the story. Get really good at telling your case and sharing your impact. As we end, I want to thank you again for being members of TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, and remind you all that as members of TENS, you have access to this year's annual pledge campaign materials. We provide a ready to go and also completely adaptable tool for you to do your stewardship campaign. That's pledge cards, sample letters, prayers of the people, other prayers that you might say during stewardship season, and weekly reflections that you can put in your bulletins. We provide those weekly reflections for the Sundays from September through the end of November. And you can use those to generate conversation, to keep people talking about what you're doing live. So you have full access to that as members of TENS. And this year's theme is Rooted in Abundance, where we really talk about digging deep into us and to our hearts about why we give and what matters to us and where that comes about. And you can access all that from our website with our secret password, Jeremiah 17:8. I will send that to you also when I send you all the materials so that you have all the access that you need. I'm going to stop sharing the screen now and pull us back into the group where we can talk about anything that you've heard tonight, any ideas you have, any questions that might have come up. I'm here to answer. Who among you develops materials for your stewardship campaign? Like maybe a brochure, or maybe you have a parish brochure. Who's doing that kind of work? I've put you all on the spot. Any questions about why you might want to create documents or how you go about it? Maybe some questions about digital giving or how we communicate with people online? Y'all are ready to go to dinner or end your day, which I appreciate. We will, I'll send you all these slides and the recording as well. I think we're going to come back and do more webinars with the Diocese of Milwaukee and share other ideas with you. But if you have any questions now, we can ask them or we can save them for another time.
Well, I would like to share since nobody's talking.
Yeah.
We do have a little, I guess you'd call it a postcard type thing that we've developed, and it has different photos, collage on it for different things that we do. And we save it especially for new people that come or visitors. But listening to you, I think that's something that we could also add on the other side, a little more information about what we do and what our ministry is, not just a photo saying welcome. So
I love that you have that postcard. That's such a great tool for newcomers, right? Because you don't send them out with an armload of stuff, but you know, it's your first Sunday, a low touch thing. And if you put some information on the back, here's what our members do. Here's how they're engaged in the world. I love that. And if you have a copy and you want to email it to me, I'd love to see it too.
Okay. Yeah.
So please do that. You can find me putting my my email address in the chat. It's davey@tens.org. Yeah, I would love to see it. I love to collect other people's materials. So,
okay, we can do that.
Thank you. Are there other examples of materials that you other folks have developed in their congregations, either for newcomers or for stewardship or to describe your congregation? When I visit, I always look at that back table, right? Like what's on here? And you can see the ones that need to be dusted off. You can see the ones that have pictures of kids who are like graduated and gone off to college now. So, you know, sometimes where a church is in developing its materials. And there are other churches that do just a great job of it. They're always refreshed. They're always like a big stack of them. People hand them out and take them. It's really important. How you talk about your church and how you share your stories is a really important thing to do. Well, I won't keep y'all. If you'd like to be released to the rest of your Thursday evening, I'm happy to end a couple minutes early, and we can. I can send this information to you and we can continue the conversation in another way. I really appreciate you showing up tonight, your time and your attention, and for being faithful members of TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night, friends.